Silver Creek, Colorado Territory, 1878. The letter trembled in Zachariah Mackey's calloused hands. The morning sun spilled through the cabin window, illuminating the paper that would forever alter his life. His brother and sister-in-law, both dead. Typhoid had swept through Kansas City with merciless efficiency, leaving their 5-year-old daughter an orphan. "Papa," a small voice called from the doorway. Zachariah looked up, his throat tightening at the word he was still unaccustomed to hearing. Hannah stood there in her nightgown, her dark hair tangled from sleep, eyes so like his brother's it made his chest ache. "Come here, little one," he said, setting the letter aside. Hannah padded across the rough wooden floor and climbed onto his lap, something she'd only recently begun to do in the months since her arrival. She'd been nearly mute when the stagecoach had delivered her along with a trunk of meager belongings. "Are we doing chores today?" she asked, her voice small but eager. "Yes, after breakfast." Zachariah managed to smile. "But first, I need to ride into town. Can I come?" Her eyes widened with hope. How could he refuse? "Get dressed then. Miss Ruby will be waiting." The mention of Miss Ruby brought a genuine smile to Hannah's face. In the short time since the schoolteacher had arrived in Silver Creek, she'd become the bright spot in both their lives. Ruby Jennings arranged the primers on each desk, her mind wandering to the tall, reserved rancher and his solemn-eyed niece. When she'd accepted the teaching position in Silver Creek, she hadn't expected to find herself so drawn to a man who barely spoke more than necessary, or to feel such tenderness for the orphaned child now in his care. The schoolhouse door creaked open, and Sheriff Patterson stepped inside, removing his hat. "Miss Jennings, got a moment?" "Of course, Sheriff. What can I help you with?" "Town council meeting yesterday. We've been discussing your situation." He cleared his throat. "Teaching contract specifies a single lady, as you know." Ruby stiffened. "Has my conduct been inappropriate in some way?" "No, ma'am. But we've had word from Sacramento. Seems you left some details off your application." Her heart hammered. Who had written to them? And what exactly did they know? The door swung open again before the sheriff could continue, and Hannah burst in, her face lighting up at the sight of Ruby. Behind her, Zachariah ducked through the doorway, his imposing frame filling the entrance. "Miss Ruby," Hannah called. "Papa said I could invite you for supper." The sheriff glanced between them with raised eyebrows, and Ruby felt her cheeks flush. What had the town council heard? And more importantly, what would Zachariah think when he discovered the truth about her past? Zachariah recognized the tension in the schoolroom immediately. Sheriff Patterson's presence and Ruby's rigid posture told him he'd interrupted something significant. But Hannah was already clasping Ruby's hand, oblivious to the undercurrents. "We caught trout yesterday," Hannah was saying. "Papa said he'd teach me to fry them like Mama used to." A shadow crossed Ruby's face, so brief he almost missed it. "That sounds lovely, Hannah," she said, her voice warm despite the strain evident in her eyes. "But I should check with your father first." Hannah turned expectantly to Zachariah. "Papa, Miss Jennings is welcome," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. The schoolteacher brought light into their home in a way he hadn't experienced since before the war. Sheriff Patterson cleared his throat. "I'll be going then. Miss Jennings, we'll continue our conversation later." He nodded to Zachariah. "Mackey." After the sheriff left, Ruby knelt to Hannah's level. "Why don't you organize the reading circle while I speak with your father?" When Hannah skipped away, Ruby turned to Zachariah, her green eyes troubled. "Mr. Mackey, I should explain." "No need to explain anything to me," he interrupted, uncomfortable with the emotion in her voice. "But there is," she insisted. "The town council has received information about me, and I'd rather you hear it from me directly." A surge of protectiveness rose in him. Whatever her past, Ruby Jennings had been nothing but kind and dedicated since arriving in Silver Creek. "Will you listen?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This evening, he found himself saying, "After Hannah is asleep." Relief softened her features. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, Hannah called out, "Papa, wait. I forgot to show Miss Ruby." She hurried over, reaching into her pocket to withdraw a crumpled paper. Carefully, she unfolded it and presented it to her teacher. Zachariah recognized his brother's pocket watch in the crude drawing, alongside 3 stick figures, one tall with a hat, one small, and one with long hair wearing a dress. "That's Papa, me, and you, Miss Ruby," Hannah explained proudly. "I made it for you." The color drained from Ruby's face as she stared at the drawing. Her eyes lifted to meet Zachariah's, filled with an emotion he couldn't name. "It's beautiful, Hannah," Ruby finally said, her voice unsteady. "Thank you." Outside the schoolhouse, Zachariah leaned against the hitching post, his thoughts in turmoil. Hannah had never mentioned her mother since arriving, yet now she'd drawn Ruby in her place. And what secrets was the schoolteacher hiding? Whatever they were, he realized with startling clarity, he didn't want them to take her away from Silver Creek, or from them. The afternoon dragged interminably for Ruby. As her students filed out at day's end, she remained at her desk, staring at Hannah's drawing. The child had placed her squarely within the family portrait, an innocent action loaded with implications that made Ruby's heart ache. She'd come to Silver Creek seeking anonymity, a fresh start after the scandal in Sacramento. Teaching had always been her calling, but she'd never expected to form such an attachment to a motherless child, or to find herself drawn to the child's taciturn guardian. The ride to the Mackey Ranch was both too short and endless. When they arrived, Hannah immediately took her hand, tugging her toward the creek behind the cabin. "I want to show you where we catch the trout," she announced. Zachariah nodded his permission, watching them with an expression Ruby couldn't decipher. At the creek bank, Hannah chattered happily, pointing out favorite spots and explaining fishing techniques with the serious confidence of a child repeating an adult's lessons. "Papa says you need patience to catch the big ones," she explained, squatting to peer into the water. "Your papa is a wise man," Ruby replied, settling on a smooth rock. Hannah was quiet for a moment, trailing her fingers in the cool water. "My first papa and mama are in heaven now," she said suddenly. Ruby's breath caught. "Yes, they are. I miss them." Hannah looked up, her small face solemn. "But I'm glad I have Papa Zach now. And you? Oh, Hannah, could you be my mama?" Hannah asked with the directness only a child could muster. "I asked Jesus for a new mama, and then you came to town." Tears stung Ruby's eyes. How could she explain the impossibility of it? That her past would soon catch up with her, that the town council would likely dismiss her once they verified the rumors. "Hannah," she began carefully, "being someone's mother is very special. It's not something that just happens." "But you love me, don't you?" Hannah's eyes were wide and trusting. "I do," Ruby admitted, her heart spilling over. "Very much. And you love Papa too. I can tell." Ruby felt her face flush. Had she been so transparent? Before she could formulate a response, Hannah continued. "He watches you when you're not looking. Like how Mr. Davis looks at Mrs. Davis in town." A rustling from the path made them both turn. Zachariah stood there, his expression unreadable. How much had he heard? "Supper's ready," he said simply. As Hannah ran ahead to the cabin, Ruby rose on unsteady legs. Zachariah stepped forward, offering his arm to help her navigate the rocky path. His touch, even through the fabric of her sleeve, sent warmth spreading through her. "Mr. Mackey," she began. About what Hannah said, "Children speak their minds," he interrupted, his voice gruff. No harm in that. But there was harm, in hopes raised and dreams kindled that could never come to fruition. Not when her past stood like a wall between her and any future here. Supper was a strained affair, at least for the adults. Hannah chatted happily, oblivious to the tension. Zachariah found himself watching Ruby. The gentle way she guided Hannah's table manners, how she listened intently to the child's stories, the shadow that occasionally crossed her face when she thought no one was looking. After the meal, Ruby insisted on helping with the dishes despite his protests. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing in the wash basin, each contact sending an inexplicable jolt through him. When Hannah was finally tucked into bed, Ruby sat across from him at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly before her. "You wanted to know what the sheriff was discussing," she began, her voice low. "Only if you wish to tell me." She took a deep breath. 3 years ago, in Sacramento, I was engaged to be married. Martin Henderson, the son of a prominent banker. Her eyes remained fixed on her hands. A week before the wedding, I discovered he had improper relationships with several women. When I confronted him, he became violent. Zachariah's hands clenched involuntarily. "I defended myself with a letter opener," she continued. "He required stitches. His family ensured the incident was portrayed as female hysteria, a scorned woman attacking her fiancé in a jealous rage." "That's not what happened," Zachariah stated, not a question. Her eyes lifted to his, surprise and gratitude in their depths. No, but his family's influence meant my word counted for little. I lost my teaching position. No school in Sacramento would hire me. And now they've written to Silver Creek. It appears so. My reputation will follow me wherever I go. Her voice trembled slightly. The town council will likely ask me to leave once they verify the story. Zachariah felt a surge of anger unlike anything he'd experienced since the war. This town needs a teacher. There will be others. Not like you. The words escaped before he could consider them. Hannah. He hesitated, then continued more softly. Hannah needs you. Something flickered in Ruby's eyes. And you, Mr. Mackey? What do you need? The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Before he could answer, a knock at the door broke the moment. Sheriff Patterson stood on the porch, his expression grave. Evening, Mackey. Miss Jennings, I'm sorry to intrude, but there's a gentleman in town claiming to be your former fiancé. Says he's come to take you back to California. Ruby's face drained of color. Martin is here? In Silver Creek. Arrived on the evening stage. He's taken a room at the hotel. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Thought you should know before tomorrow. After the sheriff departed, Ruby gathered her shawl with shaking hands. I should go? I've brought trouble to your doorstep. Zachariah stepped between her and the door. It's dark. The road is dangerous. My presence here is more dangerous, she countered. If Martin discovers I've been alone with you, he'll use it against both of us. Let him try. Zachariah's voice was steel. You'll take my bed. I'll sleep by the fire. I couldn't possibly. You can and you will. His tone brooked no argument. Whatever comes tomorrow, you won't face it exhausted and afraid on a dark road tonight. Their eyes locked in silent battle until finally Ruby nodded. As he showed her to his room, the intimacy of the moment struck him. This woman in his home, about to sleep where he had slept every night since building the cabin 5 years ago. Thank you, she whispered, her hand on the doorframe. For listening. For believing me. Get some rest, Miss Jennings. She hesitated, then asked softly, would you call me Ruby? Just tonight. Something shifted in his chest. Good night, Ruby. As he settled on the floor before the dying embers, Zachariah stared at the ceiling, wrestling with unfamiliar emotions. Hannah's words at the creek echoed in his mind. Asterisk, you love Papa too. I can tell. Asterisk, could the child see something he'd been blind to? And now that he'd begun to recognize the stirrings of his heart, would this man from Ruby's past tear away whatever future might have been possible? Ruby woke disoriented, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. The events of the previous day crashed back. Her confession, the sheriff's news, Zachariah's unexpected protection. Martin had found her. The realization sent ice through her veins. Sounds of activity drew her from the bedroom. Zachariah stood at the stove, his back to her as he fried bacon. Hannah sat at the table, carefully placing silverware. Good morning, Ruby said, smoothing her rumpled dress. Hannah beamed. Miss Ruby, you stayed over like a real family. Zachariah turned, a hint of color touching his cheeks. Hannah, remember what we discussed about Miss Jennings being our guest? The little girl nodded solemnly. It's not polite to make presumptions. Despite everything, Ruby smiled. That's a very big word, Hannah. Papa taught me. It means thinking something is true when you don't know for certain. She looked between them, adding innocently, but sometimes you can just tell. Breakfast passed in relative quiet, the approaching confrontation hanging over the adults. When Hannah had been sent to feed the chickens, Zachariah finally spoke. I'll drive you to town. That isn't necessary. It is. His jaw set in a way Ruby was beginning to recognize. I have business there anyway. She knew arguing would be futile. Very well. The journey to town was tense, each lost in private thoughts. Hannah, oblivious to the undercurrents, pointed out wildflowers and birds along the way. As they approached Silver Creek, Ruby steeled herself for what was to come. The town seemed unnaturally quiet as Zachariah helped her from the wagon outside the schoolhouse. Several faces peered from shop windows, quickly disappearing when noticed. They know, Ruby murmured. Word travels fast. Before Zachariah could respond, a man emerged from the hotel across the street. Tall and expensively dressed, Martin Henderson strode toward them with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. Ruby, my dear, he called, his cultured voice carrying in the morning air. What a charming little backwater you've found. Ruby felt herself stiffen, years of fear crystallizing into something harder. Beside her, she sensed rather than saw Zachariah straighten to his full, imposing height. Martin stopped before them, his smile not reaching his eyes as he assessed Zachariah. And who might this be? Another admirer already. Mr. Mackey kindly brought me to school this morning, Ruby said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Did he indeed? Martin's gaze turned calculating. How hospitable. Though I wonder what the good people of Silver Creek would think about their schoolmistress spending nights with a bachelor. Zachariah took a step forward, but Ruby placed a restraining hand on his arm. Mr. Henderson, she said, infusing her voice with more confidence than she felt. Whatever you've come to say, please say it, and be done. Martin's smile tightened. I've come to bring you home, of course. Your unfortunate episode has been forgiven. My parents agree that with proper guidance, you could still make a suitable wife. Suitable. The word escaped as a whisper. Well, perhaps not ideal, given your history of instability. But with your father gone and your prospects diminished, you should consider yourself fortunate for the offer. Ruby felt something shift inside her. Not fear, but anger. Fortunate? To be bound to a man who betrayed me? Who tried to? She stopped, aware of watching eyes from the surrounding buildings. Martin's expression hardened. Careful, Ruby. Your position here is precarious. I've already spoken with several town council members. They're quite concerned about having a woman of questionable temperament teaching their children. Before Ruby could respond, Hannah darted from the wagon where she'd been waiting. She positioned herself between Ruby and Martin, her small face fierce with protective instinct. Don't you be mean to Miss Ruby, she declared, her voice ringing in the morning air. She's going to be my mama. The silence that followed was absolute. Martin recovered first, a mocking laugh breaking the stillness. Well, it seems you've been busy creating illusions, Ruby. Zachariah stepped forward, placing a hand on Hannah's shoulder. Hannah, return to the wagon. But Papa, now please. As Hannah reluctantly obeyed, Martin's eyes narrowed. So it's Papa, is it? How domestic. Tell me, Mr. Mackey, was it? Are you aware of your intended's history of violence? Something dangerous flashed in Zachariah's eyes. I know the truth of what happened in Sacramento. Do you? Did she tell you how she attacked me in a jealous rage? How she had to be physically restrained? How she was dismissed from her position for mental instability? Ruby felt the stares of townspeople watching from doorways and windows. Everything she'd built here was crumbling. Mr. Henderson, Zachariah's voice was deceptively calm. I fought in the war. I've seen violent men. I know the difference between defending oneself and attacking another. Martin's facade slipped momentarily, revealing something ugly beneath. This doesn't concern you, rancher. Ruby and I have unfinished business. Miss Jennings has made her position clear. Has she? Or has she simply found a more convenient protector? Martin turned to Ruby. Tell me, my dear, does he know everything? About your mother? About why your own father cut you from his will? Ruby felt the blood drain from her face. How did he know about her mother? Zachariah moved closer to her side. Whatever you think you know, I know her mother ended her life in an asylum, Martin said coldly. Madness runs in families, they say. The gasps from onlookers made Ruby flinch. This was worse than she'd imagined. The school board would never keep her now. That's enough. Sheriff Patterson's voice cut through the tension as he approached from the direction of his office. Mr. Henderson, I think you've said your piece. Martin straightened his coat. Indeed I have. I'll be staying at the hotel should the town council wish to verify any details about their teacher's colorful past. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good day, Ruby. Consider my offer. You won't receive better. As he walked away, Ruby felt her legs threatening to give way. Zachariah's hand at her elbow steadied her. School bell's about to ring, the sheriff said quietly. Children will be arriving soon. I can't, Ruby began, her voice breaking. After what they've heard, you're still the teacher until the council says otherwise, Sheriff Patterson stated firmly. Best go in and prepare for your students. Zachariah's eyes met hers. We'll talk later, he promised. I'll bring Hannah at the usual time. As Ruby climbed the schoolhouse steps, legs wooden, she felt the weight of the town's judgment pressing on her. Her mother's illness had been her most closely guarded secret. The reason her father had eventually rejected her, fearing she carried the same tainted blood. Now everyone would know, would watch for signs, would whisper. The sound of the wagon pulling away tore at her heart. Zachariah had been kind, but surely now he would see the risk she posed to Hannah. A woman with madness in her lineage could never be a suitable mother figure. The first students began to arrive, their curious eyes following her as she moved mechanically through the morning routine. She managed to maintain composure through reading lessons and arithmetic, but when lunchtime arrived, she found herself alone in the schoolhouse, fighting back tears. A knock at the door startled her. She hastily wiped her eyes before calling, "Come in." It was Mrs. Wilson, the blacksmith's wife, carrying a covered basket. "Brought you some lunch, Miss Jennings. Figured you might not feel up to visiting the cafe today." Ruby stared in surprise. "That's very kind, but no buts." Mrs. Wilson placed the basket on the desk. "My Jonathan had nightmares for weeks after seeing what that Henderson fellow did to you. Wrote to me about it from Sacramento." Ruby's confusion must have shown on her face. "My brother worked at the bank," Mrs. Wilson explained. "He saw Henderson strike you that day. Saw you defend yourself. The stories that came after didn't match what he witnessed." "You knew?" "All this time." Mrs. Wilson nodded. "Recognized your name when you applied for the position. Didn't say anything because everyone deserves a fresh start." She hesitated. "As for the other matter, about your mother. My own sister suffers from melancholia. Illness isn't a sin, Miss Jennings." Tears welled in Ruby's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. After Mrs. Wilson left, Ruby sat stunned. Someone in town had known her story all along, and had chosen not to judge her for it. Perhaps not everyone would condemn her for circumstances beyond her control. As afternoon classes began, she noticed small changes. Several mothers who usually hurried away after dropping off their children lingered to greet her warmly. Mr. Peterson, the general store owner whose son struggled with reading, stopped by with a new primer that might help young Thomas. By dismissal time, Ruby's spirit had begun to lift. The council might still ask her to leave, but at least some in town seemed willing to stand by her. When Hannah burst through the door after the other children had gone, Ruby's heart swelled. The little girl threw her arms around Ruby's waist. "Papa said you might be sad today," Hannah declared. "But he said we shouldn't worry because good people always find a way." Ruby looked up to find Zachariah watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable. What did it mean? And would his kindness extend beyond this day, now that he knew everything? The town council meeting was set for 7 that evening. As darkness fell, Ruby walked toward the town hall, her steps heavy with dread. Zachariah had offered to accompany her, but she'd declined. Whatever judgment came, she would face it alone. The council members sat in a row behind a long table. Mayor Turner, Dr. Fletcher, Mr. Peterson from the general store, Mrs. Abernathy who ran the hotel, and Reverend Collins. Martin Henderson sat to one side, his posture relaxed and confident. "Miss Jennings," Mayor Turner began, "serious allegations have been made regarding your character and fitness to teach our children." Ruby stood straight, hands clasped before her. "Yes, sir. Mr. Henderson has provided details of an incident in Sacramento that resulted in your dismissal from your teaching position there. He also mentions concerns about hereditary conditions." Martin smirked slightly at the diplomatic phrasing. "Do you deny these allegations?" Mayor Turner asked. Ruby took a deep breath. "I do not deny that I injured Mr. Henderson with a letter opener. I do not deny that my mother suffered from a mental illness that eventually led to her taking her own life." Murmurs rippled through the crowded room. "However," Ruby continued, her voice strengthening, "I maintain that I acted in self-defense when Mr. Henderson became violent after I confronted him about his infidelity." Martin rose to his feet. "This is precisely the delusion I warned about." Ruby has always had difficulty accepting reality when it doesn't suit her romantic notions. "Sit down, Mr. Henderson," Mayor Turner ordered. "You'll have your chance to speak." The doors at the back of the hall swung open. All heads turned as Zachariah entered, followed by Mrs. Wilson and a man Ruby didn't recognize. "Pardon the interruption," Zachariah said, his deep voice carrying through the room. "But there's someone the council should hear before making their decision." Mayor Turner frowned. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Mackey." "So is condemning a woman based on one man's word," Zachariah countered. He gestured to the stranger beside him. "This is Jonathan Wilson, Mrs. Wilson's brother, recently arrived from Sacramento." Martin Henderson's face drained of color. "What is the meaning of this?" Jonathan Wilson stepped forward. I worked at Sacramento National Bank. I witnessed what happened between Miss Jennings and Mr. Henderson. His voice shook slightly with nervousness, but he continued. She came to return his ring. I was delivering documents to his office when I heard shouting. Mr. Henderson struck Miss Jennings across the face. When she fell against his desk, he advanced on her. She grabbed the letter opener in defense. Shocked whispers filled the hall. Martin surged to his feet. This is preposterous. Why would a bank clerk's word be taken over mine? Because, Mrs. Wilson said firmly, my brother has no reason to lie. You do. As for the matter of Miss Jennings's mother, Zachariah added, I fail to see how that affects her ability to teach. Unless Silver Creek has begun judging people for the illnesses of their relatives. Reverend Collins cleared his throat. The Bible teaches us not to hold the sins of the father or mother against the child. Furthermore, Zachariah continued, if character is the concern, I offer my personal endorsement of Miss Jennings. My niece has flourished under her teaching, as have all the children in her care. Ruby stared at him, overwhelmed by his public support. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. Mayor Turner consulted with the other council members in low voices before addressing the room. In light of this testimony, the council will need to reconsider. Mr. Henderson, do you have any response to Mr. Wilson's account? Martin's face had twisted with fury. This is a conspiracy. This backwater town closing ranks around an outsider. Careful, son. Sheriff Patterson interrupted from his position by the wall. You're speaking about our town and our schoolteacher. Our schoolteacher. The possessive pronoun sent warmth spreading through Ruby's chest. Mayor Turner raised his hands for quiet. The council will deliberate and announce our decision tomorrow. Until then, Miss Jennings remains our teacher. He gavelled the meeting closed. As the crowd dispersed, Martin stormed toward Ruby. This isn't over, he hissed. Your reputation will follow you wherever you go. Zachariah stepped between them. Your stage leaves at noon tomorrow. I suggest you be on it. Are you threatening me, rancher? Stating a fact, Zachariah replied evenly. Silver Creek doesn't welcome men who strike women. Something in his tone must have convinced Martin of his seriousness. With a final glare, he pushed past them and out into the night. Ruby found herself surrounded by townspeople offering support. Mothers of her students, the blacksmith and his wife, even old Mr. Daniels who had seemed so skeptical when she'd first arrived. When the crowd finally thinned, Zachariah approached. May I walk you home? They moved in silence through the darkened streets, the enormity of the evening's events settling around them. Thank you, Ruby said finally, for believing me, for standing up for me. I meant what I said about your teaching, he replied. Hannah has changed since you came. She smiles now, talks about her future. They reached the small cabin behind the schoolhouse that served as the teacher's residence. Ruby turned to face him, gathering her courage. Mr. Mackey, Zachariah, about what Hannah said, about me being her mother. She faltered, uncertain how to continue. In the moonlight, his expression softened. Children often see things clearly. Hannah chose you long before I understood what was happening in my own heart. Ruby's breath caught. And what is happening? He took a step closer. I've been alone a long time. Thought that was how it would stay. Then you came to town, and suddenly the cabin felt empty in a way it never had before. Zachariah, let me finish, he said gently. I'm not good with words. Never have been. But I know what I feel when you're near. What I fear when I think of you leaving. I might still have to leave, Ruby whispered. The council will make the right decision, he interrupted. But even if they don't, it doesn't change how I feel. How Hannah feels. And how do you feel? Ruby's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. Instead of answering with words, Zachariah closed the distance between them. His hand, calloused from years of ranch work, rose to gently cup her cheek. Ruby leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the tenderness of the gesture. May I? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. At her nod, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, sliding her hands up to his shoulders, the kiss deepened into something that spoke of longing and promise. When they finally parted, Ruby kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the feeling. I never expected this, she admitted. When I came to Silver Creek, I was just looking for a place to hide. And now, she opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. Now I'm looking for a place to belong. You already belong, he said simply. With Hannah. With me. If you'll have us. The night air seemed to hold its breath around them as Ruby searched his face. Hannah said she asked Jesus for a mother. A smile touched his lips. She's been praying for one since she arrived. Seems her prayers were answered before either of us realized it. Ruby thought of the drawing Hannah had made, the three of them together as a family. The child had seen the possibility before either adult had dared to imagine it. The council meets tomorrow, Ruby said. We should wait to tell Hannah until we know you're staying, Zachariah finished. Though I suspect she already knows in her heart. With one final, brief kiss, he bid her good night. Ruby watched him walk away, her fingers touching her lips in wonder at how completely her life had transformed in a single day. From the fear of exposure to the hope of belonging, to Silver Creek, to Hannah, and most unexpectedly, to the quiet rancher who had defended her so fiercely. The following morning dawned clear and bright. Ruby prepared for her classes with unusual care, knowing this might be her last day teaching in Silver Creek. The council was to announce their decision at noon. Her students seemed to sense the importance of the day. Even the most rambunctious boys sat attentively through their lessons. When Hannah arrived with the other children, she immediately hurried to Ruby's desk. "Papa said to give you this," she whispered, pressing a folded paper into Ruby's hand. The note was brief. Asterisk, whatever happens today, remember you're not alone. Z asterisk. The simple message gave her strength to face the morning. By 11:30, Ruby's nerves were stretched to breaking point. She dismissed the children early for lunch, asking them to return in an hour. As the last student filed out, Mayor Turner appeared in the doorway. Behind him stood the other council members. "Miss Jennings," the mayor began formally, "the council has reached its decision regarding your continued employment." Ruby steeled herself, hands clasped tightly before her. "After reviewing all testimony and taking into account your exemplary service since arriving in Silver Creek, we have voted unanimously to retain you as our schoolteacher." Relief made her knees weak. "Thank you, Mayor Turner." Mrs. Abernathy stepped forward. "Furthermore, we wish to extend your contract for an additional year. The children have progressed remarkably under your instruction." "I'm honored," Ruby managed, her voice thick with emotion. "There is one matter, however," Reverend Collins added, "regarding your living situation." Ruby's heart sank. Had they heard about her night at Zachariah's cabin? "Town regulations," the Reverend continued, "stipulate that our teacher must be unmarried. Should your circumstances change, we would need to revisit the contract." It took a moment for his meaning to register. When it did, heat flooded Ruby's cheeks. "I understand," she said carefully. As the council members filed out, Mayor Turner lingered. "Mr. Henderson left on the morning stage," he informed her quietly. "Sheriff Patterson personally ensured his departure." Ruby nodded gratefully. "Thank you for telling me." Alone again, she sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the morning's events. She was staying. Martin was gone. The shadows of her past hadn't destroyed her future after all. The door creaked open, and Ruby looked up expectantly, thinking perhaps a student had returned early. Instead, Zachariah stood there, his hat in his hands. "I heard the news," he said simply. "How?" "Small town." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Word travels fast." She rose to meet him. "Hannah will be pleased." "Hannah isn't the only one." He stepped closer. "The council mentioned something about your contract." "Yes, about marriage." Ruby stopped, suddenly uncertain. "That is, they reminded me the position is for unmarried teachers only." "I see." His expression grew serious. "That presents a problem." Ruby's heart faltered. "A problem? For what I came here to ask." He took her hands in his. "Ruby Jennings, I know it hasn't been long, but I've lived enough to recognize what matters. What's real?" She held her breath as he continued. "Hannah needs a mother. I need." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I need you. Your strength. Your kindness. The way you make our house feel like a home." "Zachariah," she whispered, hardly daring to believe where this was leading. "I'm asking if you would consider becoming my wife. Hannah's mother. Part of our family." Joy bubbled up inside her. "But my position—" "Silver Creek needs a teacher," he acknowledged. "But there are other teachers. There's only one you." The simplicity of his declaration brought tears to her eyes. "What about the ranch? It's so far from town." I've been thinking about that land closer to Silver Creek. Been saving to expand anyway. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her hands. We could build something new. Together. Yes, Ruby said, her voice strong and sure. Yes to all of it. The kiss they shared sealed more than a proposal. It promised a future neither had dared to imagine months before. When they separated, Ruby laughed softly. What will Hannah say? As if summoned by her name. The door flew open and Hannah burst in, breathless with excitement. Papa, Miss Ruby, did you ask her? Is she going to be my mama for real now? Zachariah looked sheepish. I may have discussed my intentions with Hannah this morning, and I told all my friends. Hannah announced proudly. Billy Peterson said his pa told him Miss Ruby was staying in town, and I said she was staying forever because she's going to be my mama. Ruby knelt to the child's level. Hannah, would you really like me to be your mother? Hannah's small arms wrapped tightly around Ruby's neck. I asked for you, she whispered. And you came. Over the child's shoulder, Ruby met Zachariah's gaze. In his eyes, she saw everything she'd ever wanted: acceptance, belonging, love. The path that had led her to Silver Creek had been paved with heartache, but it had brought her to this moment, to these two people who now formed the center of her world. 6 months later, Ruby Mackey stood in the doorway of their new home, watching her husband and daughter in the yard. The small house stood halfway between town and the original ranch, allowing Ruby to continue teaching while Zachariah managed both properties. Hannah raced across the grass, her dark hair flying behind her, a puppy at her heels, Zachariah's wedding gift to them both. The child's laughter carried on the spring breeze, a sound that never failed to warm Ruby's heart. Zachariah looked up, catching sight of Ruby watching them. He smiled, the unguarded smile that had become more frequent in recent months, and motioned for her to join them. As Ruby stepped into the sunshine, Hannah ran to meet her. Mama, Papa's teaching me to throw a lasso. The word still brought a rush of emotion. Mama. So simple, yet it represented everything Ruby had once believed beyond her reach. Family, acceptance, love. Zachariah's arms slipped around her waist as she reached them. How are you feeling today? He asked, his voice low with concern. Ruby placed a hand on her stomach, where the first subtle signs of new life were beginning to show. Better. The morning sickness seems to be passing. His hand covered hers, protective and tender. Hannah's already planning names. I heard, Ruby laughed. Though I'm not certain Thunderbolt is suitable for a baby. For a boy, Mama, Hannah corrected seriously. A girl would be Blossom. Zachariah chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest against Ruby's shoulder. We have time to consider alternatives. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Ruby surveyed her world with quiet wonder. From the moment Hannah had presented her with that simple drawing, a family portrait with Ruby included, their path had been set, though none of them had recognized it then. The little girl had chosen her mother long before either adult had understood the bonds forming between them. Hannah's innocent certainty had illuminated what Zachariah's heart already knew but his mind hadn't yet acknowledged. Now, as twilight gathered and the first stars appeared above their new home, Ruby offered a silent prayer of gratitude for second chances, for a child's wisdom, and for the love that had found them all when they needed it most.